How many build apps? Here, throw your hands up. In some way, shape, or form. Yeah, Chris, shooting hackathon guy. Yeah, so I work with about 60 or 70 folks, most of whom, or at least half of them, are very smart engineers in Boulder. Work for a tech company there. And I really think that with the right people, tech people can build anything you can imagine. And so the problem of apps and things like that is never, in my point of view, it's never the technology, because what you can conceive, I can conceive of, you guys can build if you have time, give enough resources. But what's, well, they can figure out engineers are problem solvers. So I don't think necessarily, so I think, first of all, I think sometimes people get excited about an engineering idea just because they can produce it. They never stop and ask the question, does anybody actually want this thing? You know, is this, we can be perfectly successful at building a product that nobody wants. So part of it is you guys know all the lean stuff, so I won't get into that. And I'm actually just filling time while Mark solves the problem here. I was born at an early age. But I did grow up, I lived in Colorado for, many, many years, since '76. But grew up a little bit in the Bay Area, spent 6th, 7th, went to De Anza. We still have De Anza Elementary School. Went to Mango, it used to be Mango Junior High, and then went to Fremont High School in Sunnyvale for the semester, then moved up to Stockton, went to Cal, graduated from there, and in a cap and gown, as I recall. Mark, I'm running out of things to say. Came to Christ my freshman year through Campus Crusade for Christ. And furthermore, I was growing and then had a big setback. Can't believe this is technology. I'm just lauding how great technology is. There's an epic fail going on right here now. You got her. You got her. And I'll start advancing. There we go.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Isn't Zia fine for him? I told Mark, how did you get hurt? Well, as soon as she volunteered, I wanted somebody, I wanted her. So, great job, Z. Makes everyone feel so welcome. So I wanted to say that engagement, when we talk about stuff, like even the stuff Mark talked about, it all comes down to engagement. Can we get people to really engage in the thing? There was a really interesting thing by what Google does. This guy, Don Harrison, he calls it the toothbrush test of the stuff that they acquire. But he said this, we ask ourselves, is this something people use once or twice a day? It doesn't solve a problem. That becomes their test to whether they're going to buy a company or not. And that's a pretty good test. So the big question, how can we help people change and grow? All of the stuff that, Mark, what you're doing with that app, it's just really to engage people, to help them to grow into everything that God's created them to be and fulfill their purpose, stuff like that. And so how do we do that? So what activates that latent energy? Because all of us have a desire to grow. How many want to change the world? Everyone raise their hand. How many want to make an impact? Everyone raise their hand. But so many people never quite cross that threshold because there's so much inertia there. So I just think that even something like when onboarding is the first thing you have to do with people that do your app or do whatever, even your ministry. Venture has an onboarding process. And so the question is, does it kind of feel like this, welcome aboard, ma'am, or does it feel like this, little A/B testing there? It's just very difficult, Does it feel like this? Does it mean you're old enough to remember watching it? So good, you got Julie there as the program director, or does it feel like that? And I think, let me just introduce you to something that you might know, but there might be a better metaphor for onboarding. It feels more like this. So a little bit about Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura is recognized as one of he's the greatest living psychologist. He's professor emeritus, still alive. He's in his 90s at Stanford. He's known as the father of cognitive behavior. And what Bandura said about any change initiative that we encounter on, like we think, man, I want to lose some weight, or I want to. Mark was telling me about this course you guys got started. Was that last the first or second week of the new thing you're doing? But everyone that joined that, whenever you enroll, you say, gosh, should I go back to grad school, or should I get my doctorate, or whatever? Before you ever do any change initiative, you always have to answer two questions. And the first question is, well, he says there's a person that engages the behavior that leads to some outcomes, which is change. And so Bandura says, so one is efficacy expectation, the other one is outcome expectation. So Bandura says this, he says, before you begin any change initiative, you have to answer these two questions. One, can I do this? Efficacy, can I really do this? Can I stick to the program? Is this class too hard for me? Will I be able to do it? The second thing is, if I do this behavior, will I get the outcome I want? And so those, you might not be thinking consciously those things, but everything that you've taken on, you've answered yes to those things, right? When you think about it? And so, will it be, if I do this thing, will it be worth it? I think I could get 6-pack abs. But will it be worth it? I mean, what am I going to walk around work without my shirt on? How am I going to show those off? So if Bandura is right, for people to begin the change and growth process, they must be convinced of two things, and then one more. One, I can do this, and two, if I do it, it'll be worth it. That's the value proposition. And the third thing is, like with an app, if I have trouble doing it or can't do it, someone will be there to help me. So rather than think of onboarding as getting someone on board about it's much more. This is the picture for me that comes to mind. You remember when you guys were learning how to ride a bike, you had your mom and dad or somebody older sibling, and they were running behind you, and they were telling you you can do it, and it's going to be so fun to learn how to ride a bike. It's going to be independence. You get down to the store. You get down to the store for me. And by the way, if you fall, I'll be there to catch you. And so when you're onboarding, when you start an app, and how many things have you begun, like apps that you've begun, and you get to the first thing and you don't know what to do, and you don't know where the back button is, and all of a sudden you just die there. And there's no place to go for help. You're sort of in Neverland up there. So I just want to have a little deal. Let me show you talk a little bit about how infomercials work, and in so doing, show you how the brain works. And in the process, learn a bit how the brain works, whether we want it to or not. It's so subtle, but these are very powerful influences that happen to us. So we all know what infomercials are. You got this guy selling a ShamWow. That guy's kind of creepy, right? How about the Snuggie? I would give anything to be at like a football game and have me and all my friends just be wearing Snuggies at the football game. Or you got Chef Tony up there, and George Foreman selling the grill, and you got this little putter thing that you can do while you're sitting on the toilet. I mean, the talent of America has been building these things. And so what happens is, every infomercial has the exact same formula. They all work the exact same way. And even though we can write out the formula, the next infomercial you see for the first time, you have to watch it. It's like you don't have any power to turn the channel when you see this first thing. Here's why. So, because the way that God wired us, all of us are wired for story. And so in screenwriting, what happens, there's something called the inciting incident. Inciting incident is life's going on, and something happens that puts life out of balance. And then what happens, there's a desire, the rest of the movie in screenwriting is how to restore that balance, what's called the object of desire. So the inciting incident takes a life out of balance and calls for a mandatory scene. So when life is put out of balance in a movie, you know that it's not going to be a good movie until that gets resolved, that problem gets solved. So that's basically how God made us. It becomes, if a movie doesn't have that resolution, we feel like really cheated. Like there's no problem that got resolved. So infomercials begin, so here's the life's going on, you have ups and downs, and you have some type of inciting incident where your life's put out of balance. You lose your job, you lose a friend, you do something, you move to a new place, your life's put out of balance, you have to take action. And then what happens is you find out that there's physical, social, personal, internal forces that are against you, and you can't resolve it. And when what you think ought to work does not work, that's when you get insight. Gee, I really thought I could contact all my old friends and network of friends that help me get a job. Come to find out they didn't return my phone calls. And that's when you get insight. And then you try it again with another strategy. And eventually, there's kind of a climax decision and your problem gets resolved. That's how kind of movies are made, but also kind of how our script for life works too. So in infomercials, so what are the inciting incidents that put life out of balance in infomercials? So if you take a minute and look at all these. So here's a lady in the upper left plunging, and ooh, that's disgusting. This other lady, the orange juice is too heavy for her. This other lady throws her trying to get a piece of salmon out of the frying pan, and eventually, for some reason, the whole frying pan goes to this guy. Can't sit down with a tray of food. He must be a brother to this guy. And the old guy's trying to pull his wife's shoe off and has a cardiac arrest, and the lady puts the drill through all. And this guy can't crack an egg, and this guy's pores are all thing. And this guy, just the amount of Cheetos that the guy was eating, it was probably less than he knocked on the floor. And the other guy, I don't know why he had to fall down measuring a window, but life happens, right? And so what happens is, so the first thing they do is they say, the commercial begins, has this ever happened to you? And so all those things, it all begins with empathy. Yeah, that has happened to me. And then they talk about the shortcomings of the current solutions. Other products just do this. The novelty that haven't been solved until now. And there's the shiny new thing that our brains really like. And then it demonstrates every infomercial that you see, the people that will be using the solution will have big smiles on their faces. And they'll say, this is not only easy, it's fun. And so somebody will be in the ab rocker, having a big smile on their face when they're doing sit-ups. And whoops. Oh, that's good. then you have testimonials, which give social proof. Then they have the anchor price. What would you expect to pay for this product? $99.95, $129, $159. And they kind of, and then they whomp. Then they give you the actual price. And then what they do is they give an urgency. Act now, or call in the next 20 minutes, and we'll give you not only this, but we'll also include, right, the ab roll or whatever. And then the second last thing is the call to action, which kind of stimulates a little adrenaline. I can do this. And then the last thing is appeals to the loss aversion. And if you're not satisfied within 30 days, send it back. We'll return you and only charge you for the handling fee, which costs more than the product, right? So, but all those things together make up the infomercial commercial, and it's irresistible. We have to watch it because that's just the way we're wired. We have to see that solution. So what if we could figure out the formula for change and growth? What if we just said, here's how people grow. So Mark, when you're doing your app, you kind of think, this is how people kind of get deeper engaged in it. And what if we could discover that like infomercial kind of thing, And so I'm just going to talk about the 4 big chemicals that are really triggered by the stuff that we do. And I'll start off with the first one, which are called endorphins. And endorphins are pain masking chemicals in our bodies. There's a whole bunch of other, but the 4 big happiness ones, the first one's endorphins. And endorphins are released when, like, one of them is through physical activity. So how many have experienced a runner's high or a workout high? You know what I mean? And so all of a sudden, you ever gone for a run and think, man, I just feel like crap, and all of a sudden, keep going, all of a sudden you start feeling this euphoric sense. And you get, some people call it second wind, but all of a sudden, man, you feel like you can run forever. And then the next day you can't walk, of course. But all that pain masking was going on. And so if you don't like working out, the second best thing to do then is to, and it's called, often called the best medicine, but it's laughter. That laughter, especially laughter in a group, releases those feel-good endorphins. And so it's why people go to comedy clubs. It's like why you like watching funny movies. And so if you know that for an app to work, that you've got to bring a little bit of joy, and it can't be all, well, this is kind of you're in the relationship with God, that's a pretty serious business, But there ought to be something that ought to be lighthearted enough that release a little bit of endorphins, because it felt good to sit in that comedy club. It felt good to do this little app. It's a little delight that gets put in there that I can respond to. Just a few things that people said, Milton Berle, the old comedian, laughter is an instant vacation, or laughter is a good way to jog internally without ever having to go outdoors. But it's that same thing. It creates, so basically, how do you build into somebody's growth plan that concept? This is not only easy, but it's fun. That you're going to be laughing when you do some of this stuff. So even if you're building a serious app, there ought to be something that catches people by surprise that causes them to laugh, and something that they can share with their friends. The big chemical is dopamine. And dopamine is the rewarder, but it's also the initiator of action. And so you have, I love this one, but it says anticipation is the electricity of childhood. But you guys remember, hope I don't ruin anyone's Christmas here, but remember what it was like to believe in Santa? Remember what Christmas Eve felt like? And your mom or dad would say, time to go to bed. I think I hear some some reindeer, and you'd run into bed. And I remember just waking up, couldn't wait for that morning. And what that is, for a little kid, that's dopamine. It's that anticipation. So dopamine kicks in. It comes from vision casting. When you hear a big vision, what you talked about tonight, Mark, when you have goal setting, just the very thought, even when you see other people's vision, when you see other people having goals, that triggers a little bit of dopamine within you. And what happens, it comes from setting goals and reaching goals, and without dopamine, you really don't have any achievement. So dopamine is that sense that, it's like, remember I said how I was looking forward to coming up here? I was thinking, I got this great California trip coming. And just that thought of being here tonight with you guys, past several months, was just a little bit of encouragement. It felt good to be thinking about how I'd be here. And so it's sort of like you can have a really crummy day at work and you're thinking, but tonight my wife and I have a date night. It's really gonna be fun. Or you're thinking, dang, I'm working so much. Oh yeah, but we are going to Spain this summer. And just that very thing that you're thinking about it in the future gives you just a little bit of, don't you guys experience that? And so that's why in some ways, even when you're planning something for your kids, I took my grandson to Disneyland, woke him up one morning and we flew up to Disneyland for a day. And I realized it probably wasn't the best way to do it. We had a great time, but it would have been better if 10 days, let's make a countdown calendar, 9 days, 8 days, and it's almost prolongs that experience of pleasure by building up to that event. So it's not just the event itself that creates that dopamine feeling, but it's the anticipation of what you're going to experience when you're there. And so dopamine has, so this is, I like this little cartoon there, but sometimes I write down tasks after I've done them just to be satisfaction. How many, after if you've got a to-do list, then you do something that wasn't on your to-do list, put it on your to-do list just to cross it off. Anybody? And the reason we do that is because it feels good. And when I talk about feels good, it's nothing that's like taking dope, but there's a reason it's called dopamine. But it's just a little bit of lift. It just felt good to do that. And so again, we have to know, if we know what kind of triggers those things, then we kind of build them into kind of the things that we're doing. And apps, obviously the badges and progress bars, even though they're just little things, they figured out that that's what makes people feel good. The leaderboards, it never shows you that you're in, 120,000th place. It says within this group, you're fourth among 10. Well, that feels pretty good. Well, you don't know that there's 10,000 people above you because that's all they show you. So to hack that system of dopamine, of accomplishment, it's better to break goals down into smaller increments. So rather than having mile 4, you have mile 1.8, mile 1.9. Because, I just need to get to the next one. And anticipating getting there is good, but then when you get there, you get a little shot of dopamine. So for even on a spiritual growth plan, it's kind of like, ideally, Chip will stand up there and say, how many, we're people of the Word, so let's commit ourselves to reading through the Bible this year. How many are committed? And everyone can commit. But if you do that, it's about 20 minutes a day. If you miss a day, it's 40 minutes. If you miss 2 days, it's an hour. And so then about 6-7% of people that said they're going to do it, so 94% of people feel like failures. However, you just get a little app that feeds you one verse. I can do that. And all of a sudden you have a 97% completion rate. And you celebrate that little by little, you get the word under yourself. And believe it or not, flow, how many know flow? How many don't know flow? Anybody living in a cave here? Flow is the key to sustainable engagement. So this is a diagram from a guy named Mihail Csikszentmihalyi. It has a long name, KCCSK. It's right here, but I've heard it pronounced that way. And he said you've got to keep people engaged, you've got to keep them in the flow. How many are familiar with this diagram? It is what every developer needs to know, because what happens is, he said you've got this vector having challenges, a low challenge to a high challenge, then your skill level, low skill to high skill. He wrote a book called Flow, and he said basically that if your challenges are bigger than your skill level, you experience anxiety and stress. However, on the other hand, if your skills are greater than your challenge, you experience boredom. I was with a group of elders in a church, and I drew this diagram up there, and I said, go put a mark where you are in relationship to the church. And every one of them was down here. They felt, I've got skills that aren't being used. I run my own corporation, but I'm handing out bulletins. And so I think what you're trying to do, Mark, is figure out what is you might be working 60, 80 hours a week, but you have a part of cognitive surplus in your life that's kingdom energy. And when you engage in that, it's like waking up in the morning, right? If it's done, that's what you're discovering. And so, but how do you keep people? So the growth path would be giving people just enough challenge, a little challenge here, they can, it's a stretch for them, but they can do it. And what happens is they get that, their skills increase, another challenge, their skills increase. So pretty much people have done all the challenges, but it never seemed like a really big deal. It wasn't like day one you're going to do this. No, let's just do these little successful things together, and then they do it. So that's a very good diagram to know how do you keep people in that flow channel for growth and change. Dark side of dopamine. It's all those things that short circuit, that give you dopamine without any accomplishment. So alcohol, drugs, pornography, gambling. People that study addictions will say the most exciting time for a gambler is when the coin is being flipped, is turning in the air. It's not that they win, but it's that excitement of what's going to happen with this thing. And so dopamine short circuits the achievement and the goal setting by just making it instant. So that's why there is a dark side of it. Some of you are familiar with Nir Eyal's work. He's also at Stanford, but he talks about he wrote a book called Hooked, and it's on how to build engagement, how to create habits for people. And he says it's 4 things. It's trigger, action, trigger, internally, externally. I think, boy, a burger would seem really good right now, or I think we should go work out, or do you want to come with me and we'll go for a run or a walk, whatever. There's an initial trigger. Then you take action with the anticipation, again, like Bandura said, that there'll be a reward. That'll be worth it. And then the thing he added to it is what keeps people hooked is by making investments. So if you're on Facebook and you hit that like button, that's an investment. And then that starts the whole thing over again, trigger, action, reward, investment. But all those things, the reason they work so well is dopamine is in the trigger, that anticipation. It's in the action. Boy, this is really enjoyable. It's in the reward, and then it's in the investment, because now that you know that's going to trigger another, that the investment is going to cause another trigger to happen. And so when you wonder why we have the habits that we do and why we get engaged in the things we do, it has to do with that's a release of those chemicals. If it doesn't do that, we don't do those things. So you've got to build in that, how do you build into those apps sort of a sense? So Mark, think about the app you're doing. Is there a goal to shoot for? Do they write something down that sort of gives them the anticipation? When you get this, by the way, you'll become one of about 7% of believers that actually are intentional about their growth. Okay, I can get that, hey, congratulations, you've done this thing, here's the next thing. Not too hard, right? Not over challenging, but enough that, man, this is good. I like this one, serotonin. How many saw the movie Inside Out? But this is the happiness. This is the thing that if you're low on serotonin and you have some extroverted high serotonin friends. So when I was growing up, B.J. Thomas sang a song called "Hooked on a Feeling." How many know that song? Oh my God, it's great. You guys watch Nick at Night. But so I'm hooked on a feeling. I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. And serotonin is produced. It comes from the sense of being admired by others, and by reflecting on our accomplishments. I'll start with those 2 things. So you have, a few years ago, 2010 I think it was, 2012, but it said the button that made Facebook billions was the headlines of the Wall Street Journal. It was all about what button? The like button. Because remember what they used to have, and if they still do, I can't find it, but it had the poke button. Poke button meant, hey. Hey. But I like that post. I like that picture. I like that video. I like that comment. I like that link that you sent me. I like being part of this community. And what they figured out, that when you got a like or you gave a like, it was producing a little bit of serotonin. And so what happens is you have, and now they're moving to these things. I'm not sure how these new icons are going to work out. But the like was kind of awkward. Oh, my father just passed away. Like, well, and so even here, so here's a great post I had. All you can eat buffet at the Colonel's, and I just went, what a day to start a diet. I got 17 likes on that one, but it was just kind of a little fun post, and it was a true thing. I was very sad that day. And we got some people that commented, but just a little bit of affirmation that other people had kind of thought that was funny too. So and people are given the ability to people to like and comment on it, which produces some serotonin in me. And then, so we're having a little talk at work about notifications. So people aren't going to like notifications. And I would say the case, if notifications are good notifications, you can have as many as possible. If you had 100 likes on something you did, and you came in and you think you got 150 notifications on your Facebook thing, and you started opening them up, hey, that was just great stuff, blah, 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 blah. That's not a downer. You'll just spend the evening kind of going through those things. One of the things Facebook also did is to have that kind of on this day type of thing. You guys get that? And so if you've been on Facebook a while, it'll go back and bring up your memories of what happened on this day and every year that you posted. So here was last year, so this is my friend, so Bob Swanson played, he's all pro for Denver Broncos, and his wife and my wife were going to a Lady Gaga concert, and it was just fun to have that picture come up, because we hadn't thought. It was kind of goofy, we dyed our hair blue and all that kind of stuff, but it was, hung out with a great group of people. Oh yeah, there's our new friends right over there, more right there. But with just reflecting on good times, and that feels good. And so in some ways, if you think about it, going back to Facebook, I think every minute, every second, the like button is pressed millions of times around the world. And I would suggest that the like button has produced more serotonin flowing than any other single thing in the history of man. Because you not only get it when you not only get a little dose of serotonin when you receive it, but also when you give it. Which is the other things that lead to serotonin. So serotonin comes from giving. You know why giving feels so good? Because you get a little bit of serotonin. And so whether it's giving money or giving time, it's volunteering, it's helping others. When you do that, it's no wonder, Jesus says it's more blessed to give than to receive. More blessed. Remember what blessed means? Happy. You're kind of happier. You get serotonin when you give something. And so that, I know you guys are involved in serve days and all that kind of stuff, but it's probably one of the best things you can do to help people feel good is they'll come back and they'll say, man, why doesn't our small group do this every week? Whatever. You have Jesus saying, given and it shall be given to you. What? Well, what does it mean if you give $1, you $2 back? I think there's something bigger than that you get more from giving than you ever get from giving. The second thing is that you get serotonin's released when you give thanks. And so thanking people for what they do is not only good for them, it's not only an act of appreciation, but it does something for you. Serotonin is released in you. That it feels good to say thank you. And until you do this, it's almost like something's bottled up. The third way that serotonin is released, to give thanks, this God's will for you, but it also comes through forgiveness. When you extend forgiveness to somebody, it releases serotonin in your body. Does that make sense? And it just feels good that this thing's resolved, and you don't know why it feels good, but those are kind of the three things that trigger that. So forgive one that I just God in Christ has forgiven you. So what could you do when you're building your apps to produce serotonin? Could you have, so Mark, could you build into yours giving, thanksgiving, forgiving? So rather than just the Bible say, but it's sort of like, is there anyone you need to forgive from your heart today? Whatever. And we'll do it. And then the last one is oxytocin. And oxytocin comes from, it's the human connection one. It's the chemical that's released. How many moms in here? Remember when you had those babies and you were just flooded with oxytocin after the baby and you bonded with the baby. It just felt so good to hold him or her on your chest there. And oxytocin was just totally flowing and you felt totally connected. So oxytocin is released, it's why we shake hands. It feels good to shake hands with somebody. And when somebody doesn't shake your hand, it feels bad. You get, you get a little cortisol. Kissing. John Gottman, a Jewish researcher at the University of Washington, says that the best thing you can do for your marriage is have an 8-second kiss every day. Because it releases oxytocin, creates bondedness, and it's a good, if your spouse won't kiss you, and I'm talking to husbands here, if your wife won't kiss you, it's better to know that today than 6 months from now, that says she's holding something against you. But he said that's just one thing. It just increased. Just doing that is going to create a great bond. Even having a dog, by the way, having a dog, not a cat, but having a dog. This is true. Harvard study that people with dogs live longer. Having a cat, I think, takes lives off of us. And then being part of a team. Part of the reason you guys love going to work, if you're at a high-performing team, just being part of something significant, being connected with one another, produce oxytocin. And so we went to Disney World. My little 3-year-old grandson, he didn't know who Winnie the Pooh was, but Winnie the Pooh was to stand there by himself. And he goes, "Let's go give the yellow guy some hugs." But even kids know intuitively just what a hug does for people. It makes them feel good. So your turn. What could you do to build into your growth plan? Elements that would produce regular doses of oxytocin, or at least give the person an awkward side hug next to you. Okay, so hacking our own happiness. So here's the whole deal. Once we know what these chemicals are, and you want to have a good day, you can actually do things that produce them in your own life. So exercise to the point of feeling good, that produces endorphins. Set big goals and doable milestones. Cross something off your list. It's producing dopamine. Reflecting on your accomplishments of the day and give your time and energy to helping someone else express thankfulness produces serotonin. And then have and cherish physical contact. 6-second kiss, or recommended 8 hugs per day, or get a dog, produce oxytocin. And so you can actually kind of hack your own happiness, when you're just kind of feeling down. If some of you remember reading Ann Landers, I think there's probably still colonies, she's been dead for years, but people would always be kind of feeling depressed. She said, go help somebody. Go help somebody else. You'll feel better. Bring a meal to a neighbor. Bring some flowers to so-and-so, But they understood all this stuff before they knew how the chemistry worked. Hacking other people's happiness, but exercise and laugh with your friends, family, and colleagues. Help others create vision and goals and recognize them for their baby steps. So if you're in a discipling relationship, the very fact that you're setting goals and setting vision for some people to do is going to produce in them, that dopamine. It's going to feel good. I don't want to, no, it's going to help them by setting a vision. Help someone else, help another, and then go give the yellow guy some hugs. Yeah. And if you're a leader or parent, what can you do to build an environment that invites regular doses of endorphins through laughter, dopamine through clear vision, anticipation, goals, and celebration, serotonin through recognition, reflection, thanksgiving, and service and forgiveness, then oxytocin through physical contact, creating a sense of community and safety. Does that make sense? So it's almost like once we kind of know some of these secrets, we can just build them into just not only the apps that we're doing, but also the way that we're regularly living life. And I'll finish with this, but a few thoughts of mine. Engaging the happiness chemical is not a guarantee of success when you build an app, but it's hard to think how we can be successful without doing so, since they're ingrained in everything people do. And the last time I checked, they ought to want to is not a happiness chemical. In other words, they're Christians, so they ought to want to read the Bible. They ought to want to pray more. They ought to want to be in a small group. They ought to want to do this. If you ignore just kind of how the way God's made us, we'll end up saying, well, they just don't get it all the time. But on the other hand, we know it kind of triggers involvement. People want to be part of a community because it's going to produce oxytocin. They want to have small goals to look forward to and achieve, which is going to be dopamine, and they want to be admired and give thanks. You could just be creating a wonderful community doing this. Thank you.
Second, we always like to open the floor for questions. So, any of you had a question for Eric about any of these chemicals? Or
anybody want to give the yellow guy some hugs after this? Yeah.
You talked about Eric Bandura. Is he accessible? Is he do you know anything about him?
Bandura, I don't know. I know he's Professor Emeritus, and but he's still alive. And so I don't know if he's still on campus or not, but you can start by reading his stuff, but his stuff's on cognitive psychology, on behavioral change. And I think those two big questions, can I do it? And if I do it, will it be worth it? Can't ignore those. We have to assure them at the beginning of any venture, you can do this. And if you do this, here's how it'll be worth it. might be through a testimonial of somebody that went through the program, whatever. But that's what has to be answered. They're not just because, oh, this is great, I'm just going to do it. I see so many things, you know. Took a spiritual assessment that says read the book of Matthew. I'm not going to read the book of Matthew. It didn't tell me what I'd get if I did that. You know, it didn't. Plus it's a lot of chapters, right? Other thoughts? Yeah.
So I want to start. I have a comment and then a question. So I want to say that I really appreciate your talk, and it helped me sort of frame our biological context within our spiritual context.
Yeah.
So I feel like we kind of live in like fits and starts. We have good things happen, and then we're just kind of dry spells. So I think if you follow these practices, you kind of have a more consistent experience of
Probably
what God's
so.
designed for us.
Yeah. So how many here were here heard Yukai Chow, who spoke here? So I just with him last week in Denver, and I watched his talk. As soon as given, I watched online. But it was kind of the same thing through gamification. When Jesus called the disciples, people responded to gamification is a challenge, right? Follow me and I'll make the fish the way. He went through all these biblical characters, tying them to his gamification matrix. But people that have studied this have kind of figured this stuff out, and we're all subject to it, although they don't tell us the secret sauce. You know, why do we have to watch infomercials? The first time, at least, we sing. Why do we have to watch at the end? Because we can't help but do it. It's just the way God made us. If we see a problem, we want to see how that gets resolved. You know, so once you know how they work, yeah, you can have to be more intentional. Other thoughts or comments, questions? Yeah. Steve.
One question for Mark and one question for you. Mark, now that you've heard this, are you going to include Jesus badges in your app?
Oh yeah, you gotta game up. You gotta get those crowns going.
Somehow I think I just got mocked there.
And for you, Eric, how have you implemented what you've learned from this in your own professional life?
You know, I've talked to my own company about these things, and for most engineers, it's kind of like, what? But it's helpful for them to kind of see what they have to build. And then I do kind of think when I do intentionally, once you kind of figure out what those are, when I try to exercise every day, I try to hang with friends every day. You know, there's just some things that now they know that you just kind of need those things. It just kind of, you just kind of build them in like that. So personal, maybe not professional. Yeah.
Now that I understand about the infomercial, it's great that you highlighted. Do you see a lot of difference between infomercial versus commercial?
I don't know. I've been fascinated with infomercials for a while, and but commercials probably do the same thing. Although they have more time to tap into a longer scene. So for there, it's the object that you don't have, that if you had it, if you drink Coke makes the world go round. No one's ever frowning drinking a Coke. Coke is what makes you happy. It's the real thing. It's all the things that they figured that out. So that, by association, I get to hang out with these happy people. That's probably, oxytocin there happening. But everything's triggering something.
Right.
When you see a great beer commercial or something like that, what's that triggering? Here's a bunch of buddies. That's oxytocin. I'd like to be hanging out with those guys. I'd like to be at that party. It's triggering something that by association.
There's a gentleman named Orrin Claff who wrote a book called Pitch Anything. You're reading it right now, I know.
I was listening on the way over.
Yeah, so he talks about it in terms of framing.
Yeah.
Right? So you frame, you create these sort of desirabilities of whether it's a power frame or a time frame. You have a limited time. I talked about a few of these earlier, and you can control or manipulate or guide people's emotions or feelings through these various frames with how you present ideas. And so I think we have to be shrewd enough to understand what's happening when we say words or we write things. They're triggering some of these frames. I think it's shrewd of us to pay attention to those and understand how we impact the world.
And the way he writes this is my second time through it.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically saying I've discovered these immutable laws that people can't resist. In other words, like the framing thing. So he gives an example. When you go to the doctor has decided what the frame is.
Power frame.
Yeah, he's got a power frame. So he's sitting there, and he's dressed either in a suit, he's got a medical garment, he's got casual clothes on, and you're sitting there, basically in your underwear with some being totally exposed. He tells you to sit down, you sit down, he tells you to stand, he tells you to turn around. Whatever you do, he says, because the frame is already established, he's the expert. And he talks about Mother Teresa going to the doctor. She's not afraid of death, she's not impressed by titles, and she changed the frame that to basically be with her, they had to volunteer to work down in Tijuana in medical clinic.
A moral frame.
Yeah, she played a moral frame above their status frame. And so he said one of the frames is going to control the conversation. So it's kind of that stuff like, so every engineer here would benefit from a little bit of social science behind that.
Well, this is a really important one for us as Christians.
Yeah.
Right, and especially those who get into these cognitive, discussions with people in their faith. You have to understand you have a high moral authority with the kingdom of God inside of you. You
Yeah.
need to own that,
Yeah.
right? You need to understand what you have with that power. When we talked about the power of God in you, there's a very high moral frame that we all have the ability to tap into and use.
Yeah, and if you don't think it works, I mean, this is what Martin Luther King did.
Yeah.
He played the moral card. If Simon Sinek in the What Great Leaders Know, starting with Why video, but he said King believed that there were two types of laws: those created by, he called it higher power, but God, and those created by man. And it wasn't until the laws of man matched the laws of the higher power that justice would be there. And for a non-believer, for a secular person to say that, but he framed it very well. And so when you look at the I Have a Dream speech, he appeals to our founding documents, he appeals to scripture, and he appeals to hymns. You talk about a moral framework. He just did it.
One last question.
I just wanted to ask something. So there's another book called Give and Take that just kind of feeds into the concept of giving, where they go to different examples, and these people are run out of energy, but the way that they got more energy was ultimately giving more and kind of continuing on.
Interesting. Yeah. So you see people that get glimpses of it, and they'll just like, this is kind of strange. But all that research, so on the slide, the slide deck, but on the slide deck and the notes part, I've got all that stuff documented where that stuff comes from, like why Thanksgiving, giving, all release are serotonin releasers. And so people discover why do the people feel good after they give? So they understand a little piece of it, and I think this chemicals thing is kind of a big deal.